Before we begin, if you enjoy cinematic sci-fi where humanity punches far above its weight, tap like, subscribe for more HFY stories, and tell me in the comments what you think would terrify the galaxy most about humans. Now let's begin. The galaxy had 1,000 ways to measure danger, and all of them stopped working when the predator appeared. Entire civilizations had learned this too late, their histories ending not with screams but with silence, their worlds left intact yet empty, as if life itself had decided to resign. In classified archives and forbidden lectures, the creature was referred to only by translation errors and fearful metaphors. The deadliest predator in known space. The ender of packs. The silence that hunts. No scholar dared give it a proper name, because names implied familiarity and familiarity implied survival. Elias Ward had read those files once years ago, and dismissed them as exaggerated relics of pre-FTL paranoia. Humanity had a habit of turning ancient horrors into campfire stories once better sensors and faster engines arrived. Elias was a surveyor now, contracted to chart fringe systems for potential mining and listening posts. It was dull work, mostly empty stars and lifeless rocks, and he liked it that way. The fringe was quiet. Quiet meant alive. The planet below his damaged shuttle did not feel quiet. Ash-colored plains stretched to the horizon, broken by black stone ridges that looked less like mountains and more like scars. His sensors were unreliable after atmospheric entry had torn half his array loose, but even through the static, the readings were wrong. No storms, no tectonic instability, no radiation spikes, yet the silence pressed against him like a held breath. Elias had learned to trust that feeling. He tightened the straps on his survival pack and limped away from the wreckage, favoring his left leg where shrapnel had bitten deep. He did not know that he was already being counted. High above, in layers of perception no human instrument could touch, awareness spread across the land. The predator pack did not see as prey species did. They tasted probability, mapped intent, and felt the subtle gravitational tug of decision. An anomaly had fallen from the sky, burning and loud, but now it moved slowly, bleeding heat and defiance in equal measure. Not a rival species. Not a hunter. Something else. Elias reached a rock outcropping and paused, breath fogging inside his helmet. He could have activated his distress beacon hours ago, but fringe protocols were strict. Broadcasting before establishing local threat levels invited pirates, slavers, or worse. Ironically, the only danger he was trained to fear here was the one he could not detect. He scanned the horizon, rifle loose in his grip more out of habit than confidence. There were no tracks, no movement, no sound. The planet felt abandoned, yet the air vibrated faintly, as if something enormous had just passed through and left its wake behind. He laughed under his breath, a short, humorless sound. "Get a grip," he muttered. Talking to himself kept the panic at bay. He had survived worse than a bad landing. A few hours of hiking, a defensible position, then the beacon. Simple. The ground shifted. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just enough for Elias to feel it through the soles of his boots. His laughter died. He froze, every survival instinct screaming. The rifle came up, uselessly sweeping empty land. Still nothing. Then the silence deepened, like a door closing somewhere far away. They emerged without warning, not from behind rocks or over ridges, but from perception itself. One moment the plain was empty. The next it was full. Massive forms ringed him at a distance, their outlines bending light, their presence pressing down on his thoughts. They moved with the coordination of a single organism, each step precise, deliberate, inescapable. Elias had faced hostile aliens before, but this was different. These were not opponents. These were inevitabilities. His suit's threat analyzer finally screamed to life, overwhelmed by readings it could not classify. Mass estimates spiked and vanished. Energy signatures folded in on themselves. His HUD flooded with warning icons until it shut down entirely, as if embarrassed by its own inadequacy. Elias did the only thing left to him. He lowered the rifle. It was not surrender. It was acknowledgement. He straightened as much as his injured leg allowed and met the gaze of the nearest shape. Where eyes should have been, there was depth, an impression of attention so intense it felt like being dissected without a blade. His heart hammered, but he did not run. Running was for creatures that believed escape was possible. The Alpha stepped forward. It was larger than the rest, its presence warping the space around it. Elias felt a pressure behind his eyes, memories surfacing unbidden, fragments of who he was and what he feared. The creature did not attack. It circled him once, slow and thorough, as if reading a story written in blood and bone. Elias clenched his jaw and stayed still. He thought of home, of Earth's blue oceans and the stubborn optimism that had pushed humans into the dark between stars. If this was how he died, he would not give the galaxy the satisfaction of seeing him beg. A smaller shape stumbled at the edge of the circle. It collapsed with a sound like stone cracking, its body shuddering as dark fluid soaked into the dust. The pack reacted instantly, tightening formation, attention shifting. Elias saw his chance then, though he could not have explained why he took it. Maybe it was reflex. Maybe it was the same flawed instinct that made humans stop for strangers on burning roads. He moved toward the fallen predator. A low vibration rolled through the air, a warning that rattled his bones. Elias stopped, hands open, and spoke softly, though he doubted they understood his words. "I'm not a threat," he said, voice steady despite everything. "I can help." The Alpha watched him, unreadable. Elias knelt beside the wounded creature, ignoring the pain in his leg, and reached for his medkit. He did not know yet that this choice would rewrite the way the universe understood both predators and humans. He only knew that leaving someone to die, no matter how monstrous, had never been part of his species' story. The Alpha lowered its head. Across the stars, ancient warnings stirred, and the galaxy, unknowingly, took its first step toward fear of a very different kind. Elias worked slowly because haste was the language of prey. Every movement of his hands felt magnified beneath the attention of the surrounding pack, each shift of posture sending ripples through the air that he sensed rather than heard. The wounded predator lay on its side, vast chest rising in shallow, uneven pulses. Up close, its size was overwhelming, not just in mass but in presence, as if gravity favored it. Its hide was a lattice of dense muscle and layered plating that shimmered faintly, adapting even now to the environment. The injury was worse than he had expected. A deep rupture ran along its flank, edges cauterized by energy rather than torn by claw or blade. Elias frowned behind his visor. This was not the work of nature. Someone had hunted here. That thought steadied him. Fear receded, replaced by focus. He had been trained to treat injuries across species, at least well enough to stabilize until real help arrived. His medkit whirred as it analyzed the alien tissue, throwing up warnings and recommendations in equal measure. None of them mattered. He trusted his hands more than the software. He cleaned the wound, applied a polymer sealant, and injected a broad-spectrum regenerative compound, hoping its aggressive adaptability would not prove fatal. The predator twitched, a low sound rumbling from its core that vibrated through Elias's bones. He froze, breath held, waiting for the Alpha's response. It did not come. The pack remained still, their attention focused and heavy, like the pause before a storm breaks. Elias exhaled and continued. As he worked, impressions pressed against his thoughts. Not words, not images, but something closer to emotional pressure, a tide of instinct and assessment. He felt weighed, measured, and oddly remembered. The Alpha was not just watching him. It was comparing him to something else, something long gone. When the medkit chimed completion, Elias leaned back on his heels, sweat cooling against his spine. The wounded predator's breathing had evened, its massive form relaxing fractionally. Relief washed through him, sharp and unexpected. He had not realized how invested he had become until that moment. He rose slowly, hands still visible, and took a step back. The circle tightened. The pack moved as one, closing the distance with soundless precision. Elias's heart rate spiked despite his best efforts. This was it then. Help rendered, debt collected. He squared his shoulders and forced himself to meet the Alpha's gaze again. If he was about to die, he would do it standing. Instead of striking, the Alpha stepped forward and stopped an arm's length away. Elias could see details now, fine fractures in its armor, scars that told stories of survival against foes he could barely imagine. The creature inclined its head slightly, not in submission but in focus, and the pressure in Elias's mind intensified. He staggered as something brushed his consciousness. Memories flickered, not his own. Burning skies. Packmates falling. Betrayal wrapped in false treaties and plasma fire. The taste of extinction lingering on the edge of survival. Elias gasped, one hand bracing against his knee as the flood receded. He looked up, eyes wide. "You remember?" he whispered, unsure why he said it aloud. The Alpha's attention sharpened. Elias realized then that the creature was not testing his strength or his fear. It was testing his truth. His intentions lay open, unguarded by the mental disciplines other species cultivated. Humans were bad at hiding from themselves, and apparently that was enough. The wounded predator stirred, pushing itself upright with a grunt that shook dust from the plain. It fixed one luminous eye on Elias and did not look away. Slowly, with effort, it lowered its head until its brow touched the ground. Elias did not move. He did not breathe. The pack reacted, tension rippling outward, but the alpha remained still. A sound rolled from its chest, deeper and more complex than anything Elias had heard before. The air seemed to bend around it, carrying meaning without translation. Elias felt the intent settle into him like a weight, not crushing but anchoring. Acceptance. Not of his presence, of his action. Elias sank to one knee without thinking, mirroring the wounded creature's posture. It felt right in a way that defied logic. He rested his palm against the ground, a gesture of grounding he had learned planets ago, and waited. Time stretched. The sun edged lower, painting the plains in long shadows. Finally, the alpha turned away, breaking the circle. The pack followed, reforming into a loose formation that faced outward rather than in. Elias realized with a start that he was no longer the focus. He was inside. A tremor ran through him that had nothing to do with fear. He rose carefully and took a tentative step forward. No reaction. Another step. The wounded predator shifted closer, massive shoulder brushing his arm with surprising gentleness. The contact sent a jolt through him, not pain but awareness, a low hum that settled into his bones. "Guess I'm not lunch," Elias murmured, voice unsteady. The alpha glanced back at him once, a look heavy with implication. Elias sensed that this was not mercy. It was judgment. He had been weighed and found something. Useful perhaps. Familiar maybe. The word forming at the edge of his thoughts was stranger than either. Kin. Far above the planet, sensors aboard distant ships flickered as ancient stealth fields adjusted, and new calculations began to ripple through the hidden networks of the galaxy. Elias did not know it yet, but his survival had already altered probabilities far beyond this silent world. Elias stayed with the pack longer than any rational calculation would allow. The alpha's presence was constant, a weight pressing on his awareness, yet not oppressive, more like gravity itself had shifted to include him. Days passed, measured not by clocks but by the rhythm of the predators' lives. Hunting, resting, observing. Elias learned to move as they did, small adjustments to posture and pace, learning the language of presence, the signals in a flick of a tail, the meaning behind a shift in scent carried on the wind. Every instinct honed over millennia in the predator's lineage was available to him if he could only recognize it. He treated the wounded creature daily, the act a silent negotiation. Healing was not merely tending flesh but understanding intent. The creature had no words, yet every blink, every subtle flex of muscle carried meaning. Elias's hands worked as much to communicate as to repair. Pain met relief in equal measure, and gradually the flinches and twitches eased. He spoke softly as if the cadence of human speech itself mattered, and perhaps it did. Nothing in the predator's history suggested they had encountered a species that neither fled nor dominated, a species that simply acted without expectation of reward. Elias wondered if that was why the alpha allowed him to remain. Sleep came in stolen moments, one eye always open, one ear tuned to vibrations in the ground. The pack never fully relaxed in his presence, but neither did they threaten. Elias began to recognize the patterns in their movement, the rhythm of hunting runs and rest periods. He began to predict shifts in formation, subtle changes that marked the alpha's intent. And he learned patience, a human virtue alien to the predator's culture, wielded not in strength but in consistency, in the quiet repetition of deeds. One evening, as twin moons bled pale light across the plains, the alpha approached him. Elias froze, not from fear, but from recognition that this was a moment that would define them both. The alpha lowered its massive head to his level, nose brushing against his shoulder. Elias felt the rumble of its chest beneath his hand, vibrations echoing into his ribcage. He remained still, matching the creature's calm with his own, allowing understanding to pass through silence rather than gesture. The pack observed from a distance, alert but restrained. He realized then that he was no longer a visitor. He was part of this assembly. Time stretched further, and Elias began to notice the alpha's interest extended beyond the immediate. Memories or impressions flickered across his mind, images of other species once bonded and lost, betrayals wrapped in the guise of diplomacy, the extinction left in the wake of misunderstanding. The alpha's gaze lingered on him, measuring, weighing. Elias knew instinctively that he was being tested, not in combat but in fidelity. Could he exist among predators without attempting to dominate? Could he endure exposure to something utterly alien and not flinch from it? Each day, each interaction was a silent examination. He spoke softly, intentionally, words that carried the rhythm of human intention rather than command. The pack responded gradually, adjusting formations subtly when he moved, aligning positions in ways that accommodated his presence. The wounded creature now rose on its own, following commands unspoken. Elias realized he was learning the predator's language as much as they were learning his humanity. Each shared moment, every gesture, every act of care, tightened the bond that had begun the instant he chose empathy over fear. The Alpha's attention became directive, guiding rather than coercive. Elias understood what was required, not through explicit instruction but through immersion. He moved when they moved, rested when they rested, observed patterns in the hunt and the interactions with their environment. The wilderness itself became a classroom, the pack his tutors, and he, paradoxically, their pupil and peer. There was a strange exhilaration in this equality, tempered by the awareness of how easily it could be revoked. One misstep could undo everything. One false sign, one impulsive act, and he could return to being prey. The Alpha's constant oversight was not punishment, but opportunity, a measure of trust extended cautiously and precisely. Then came the day when the ritual began. It was not a ceremony in the human sense, not something he could have anticipated or rehearsed. The Alpha's gaze fixed upon him, unwavering, while the pack formed a circle around them. Elias's hands itched for the medkit, for tools, for leverage, but none were required. The air carried a weight he could not name, heavy with anticipation and history. He approached the Alpha, matching its pace, following the subtle cues in its posture, the tilt of the head, the alignment of limbs. He knelt, as it had lowered itself, and felt the vibration of acknowledgement through the ground. A shared moment of stillness followed, endless yet brief. The Alpha pressed closer, not aggressively, not submissively, but intimately, the contact a statement of recognition. Elias responded instinctively, palm on the Alpha's forelimb, matching the rhythm of its pulse. He felt something shift, a resonance not of mind but of awareness. A tether formed, subtle and unbreakable, the understanding that he was no longer alone and that neither was he now insignificant. Bonkin. The thought emerged unbidden, fitting with a clarity that startled him. The pack adjusted their positions, forming a wider circle now, acknowledging the new connection without intrusion. Elias felt the Alpha's presence in a way that transcended proximity, a shared awareness that extended to every member of the assembly. He was no longer merely human, isolated and vulnerable. He had entered into a relationship older than any history recorded, and that understanding carried power beyond any weapon he had ever known. As night deepened, the twin moons casting long shadows, Elias realized he had crossed a threshold. The universe outside this plane, with its fleets, its calculations, its assumptions about humans and predators, remained unaware of the bond being formed here. He understood that when they eventually emerged, nothing would be as it had been. The predators had chosen him, and in doing so, they had altered the potential trajectory of countless systems, countless calculations of threat and survival. He rose slowly, brushing dust from his suit, eyes meeting the Alpha's luminous gaze. There was no triumph in the gesture, no arrogance, only acknowledgement and understanding. The Alpha inclined its head once more, a silent promise and a warning intertwined. Elias had survived, but survival was only the beginning. Trust had been earned, yet the true test had yet to come. He looked toward the horizon, where the plains melted into darkness. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued in ignorance, counting on conventions that no longer applied. Elias understood then that his path forward would be dictated not by human technology or strategy, but by the bond he had forged with a creature older and deadlier than any fleet could imagine. And for the first time he felt the full weight of what that might mean, not as fear but as purpose. The first warning came as a ripple through the sensors of a distant fleet. Calculations that once assumed predator movements as random now faltered under anomalies too precise to ignore. The Galactic Council, having long catalogued the species as a threat only in theory, finally recognized the magnitude of the error. Reports of a human surviving in proximity to the predators, unscathed and active, triggered emergency protocols. Fleets were dispatched not just to observe, but to eliminate the aberration. Elias sensed the shift before any scanner could confirm it. The pack became restless, movements sharpening, tails flicking in subtle signaling that only he could interpret. The Alpha's presence was heavier, attention more intense, as if acknowledging the approach of an intelligence equal in threat, but inferior in instinct. Elias felt the underlying tension, the prelude to violence that could erase months of cautious coexistence. He had trained for hostile encounters with other species, but this was different. These were humans armed with fleets, strategies, and arrogance. An arrogance that underestimated what a bond between human and predator could achieve. The first skirmish unfolded before they even reached visual range. Scouts in sleek vessels, assuming superiority, advanced into the system. The predators moved with a coordination that belied instinct, deploying themselves with precision, flanking the intruders while remaining unseen. Elias, riding among them, directed subtly, relying on observation and intuition rather than command protocols. The alpha's head would tilt, a flicker of movement, and the pack responded, shifting seamlessly across the terrain, preempting attacks before weapons were deployed. Explosions lit the plains, but Elias felt no fear. The predators were careful, surgical even, ensuring that each action neutralized threats without unnecessary destruction. A drone of energy fire passed over, but each strike met empty ground. The pack had already adapted, anticipatory and fluid. Elias marveled at their intelligence, realizing that this was not a mindless killing machine but a society of hunters operating with complex strategy and shared cognition. The alpha watched him as he moved, and in that gaze was recognition. He was no longer an outsider observing. He was a participant in the choreography of survival and dominance. When human reinforcements arrived, armored and confident, the battle escalated. They underestimated both the predators and the human in their midst. Elias moved among them, predicting their tactics and subtly adjusting the pack's responses. He did not issue commands, he suggested, through presence and observation. Predators adapted instinctively, coordinating strikes that disabled ships, dismantled landing operations and neutralized weapons without a single human casualty. Discipline and instinct combined with his human intuition created an unpredictable pattern that left the invaders scrambling. A captured mercenary vessel attempted to flee, carrying reports that would alert other fleets. Elias observed its trajectory, calculating odds and timing, and guided the Alpha's movement. With a precision that felt almost casual, the Predator intercepted, immobilizing the vessel without destruction. The pilot's eyes widened as the Alpha's massive head emerged from the shadows, recognizing the bond without comprehension. Elias felt the subtle satisfaction of deterrence, the realization that survival and strategy could coexist with mercy, and that power lay not in annihilation, but in restraint informed by understanding. Hours passed, yet the predators never tired. Elias, moving alongside the Alpha, began to feel the resonance of their coordination, the rhythm of a bond that now encompassed action as well as presence. Each calculation he made, each intuitive adjustment, was mirrored in their movement, creating a synthesis of human ingenuity and apex instinct. He realized the true scope of what had been forged in the plains. A human was no longer merely a participant among predators, but a node in a network older than recorded history, capable of recalibrating outcomes that entire fleets assumed would proceed predictably. By nightfall, the battlefield was quiet. Disabled vessels drifted, systems inert, while survivors scrambled back to regroup. Elias stood among the pack, surveying the aftermath. There had been no unnecessary destruction, no loss beyond what was required to neutralize the threat. The predators relaxed slightly, forming a perimeter around him, their attention unwavering yet measured. Elias understood that their observation was no longer solely protective, it was anticipatory. They trusted him, and that trust amplified their effectiveness in ways no human fleet could have predicted. The Alpha approached, massive silhouette outlined against the twin moons, and Elias met its gaze without hesitation. For a long moment, there was no movement but for the rise and fall of shared breath and energy, the quiet confirmation that what had begun on a scarred plane had now been validated in conflict. Elias felt the magnitude of the connection, a bond forged in empathy and choice, tested by survival and proven under fire. This was no simple alliance, it was a synthesis of species and instinct, a partnership that defied conventional strategies and expectations. He looked toward the horizon, imagining the ripple of astonishment that would soon reach distant systems, the reassessment of human capability now inevitable. He did not feel triumph. Instead, there was clarity, a recognition that the universe had miscalculated, and that this miscalculation was only the beginning. The Alpha's head lowered slightly, a gesture both acknowledgement and caution. Elias understood then that the bond he shared with the Predator would define every engagement yet to come, shaping not only survival but influence in ways the galaxy had yet to perceive. The night deepened, and the stars reflected in the armored hides of the pack. Elias felt the weight of responsibility, tempered by the extraordinary assurance that he was not alone, that the deadliest predators in known space had chosen him, and that choice had irrevocably shifted the balance. Somewhere beyond the system, other fleets would approach with confidence and hubris, unaware that their calculations had become obsolete. Elias exhaled slowly, feeling the pulse of the Alpha through the ground, steady and unyielding. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now it would learn in time that humans did not merely survive, they redefined the rules of survival. Elias watched the twin moons dip below the horizon, their fading light casting the plains in shadow and silver. The pack had gathered close, the Alpha at the center, its massive frame a living anchor against the dark. He felt the pulse of the Alpha beneath the ground, a steady rhythm that resonated with his own heartbeat. Months had passed since he first stepped onto this scarred world, months in which fear had been replaced by understanding, and survival had grown into partnership. He was no longer an observer in their world, he was part of it, integral and acknowledged. News of the battle had already begun to ripple through the galaxy, though the Council and military fleets had yet to grasp the full scale of what had occurred. Fleets that had approached with arrogance now recalculated their strategies, reassessing a human who had not only survived but commanded influence over predators feared for eons. Elias understood the gravity of this realization, and he smiled faintly, not out of pride but comprehension. Humanity was underestimated yet again. But this time the margin of error belonged to him and those he had bonded with. The Alpha stepped closer, its breath heavy and warm in the cool night air. Elias instinctively lowered his gaze and then met it, not with fear but with the steady eye of someone who had earned a place in a predator's hierarchy. He had learned to read every subtle movement, the tilt of the head, the shift in stance, the slight flare of nostrils, as signals not only of intent but of emotion. This was more than survival, it was connection. A single misstep could undo everything, yet every choice reinforced the bond. Elias knelt, placing a hand on the Alpha's shoulder. The gesture was mutual recognition, an unspoken vow that neither would act without consideration of the other. He felt the predator's response ripple through him, a vibration of trust and awareness that went beyond language. The pack watched in silence, their attention disciplined, each member acknowledging him not as prey, nor as subordinate but as kin. Elias realized fully then the depth of what had been forged. The galaxy had never seen humans act like this, with empathy that conferred strength and courage that commanded respect. Distant lights flickered on the horizon, approaching faster than any scout should. Elias's pulse quickened, though not from fear. He had anticipated this moment. Fleets, intelligence vessels, perhaps even council warships, drawn by rumors of a human surviving contact with apex predators. Yet he did not panic. Instead, he turned to the Alpha, a single gesture indicating preparation and coordination. The pack responded immediately, a fluid movement of massive limbs and precise spacing, ready to defend, deter, or dominate depending on the threat. The first vessels breached the atmosphere, sleek forms glinting under starlight, confident in their firepower. Elias raised a hand, and the Alpha lowered its massive head in acknowledgement. This was no ordinary engagement. Here, strategy intertwined with instinct in ways no human war doctrine could account for. The predators moved with a fluid precision, guiding the invaders into carefully prepared zones, cutting off escape routes without unnecessary aggression. Elias's presence, his human intuition combined with their ancient cunning, created a synergy that turned the battlefield into a living network of awareness and response. As the first shots of energy fire lit the sky, Elias's mind raced through possibilities. He did not fear death, nor did he seek conquest. He sought balance, a demonstration of what humans could do when fear and instinct aligned, when compassion and strategy merged. He observed the fleet faltering, their algorithms unable to anticipate the unpredictable coordination of apex predators guided by human insight. One by one, ships were disabled, not destroyed, warning the rest that their assumptions were flawed. Every movement, every adjustment reinforced the singular truth: humans could shape the response of even the galaxy's most feared creatures. Then came the climax. A council command ship emerged from hyperspace, imposing and confident, carrying both authority and hubris. Elias's stomach tightened with anticipation, yet his voice remained calm as he spoke to the Alpha. The Predator's head tilted, comprehension gleaming in its luminous eyes. They advanced together, human and beast, a single entity of strategy and instinct. The fleet attempted to engage, but every maneuver was anticipated, every strike neutralized. Elias guided the pack through a sequence so intricate it appeared almost choreographed, combining feints, suppressions, and displays of overwhelming force without a single loss beyond what was necessary to assert control. The council vessel hesitated, calculations running, indecision palpable. Elias stepped forward, unarmed, standing in plain view. The Alpha and the pack fanned out behind him, a living shield and warning both. The command ship's captain signaled, hesitation overtaking hubris. Elias raised his hand not as a threat but as acknowledgement. The humans and predators would not harm unless pressed, but they would not yield. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's capacity for partnership, for strategy, for influence, and now it would learn that lesson in full measure. Silence fell as the fleets withdrew, a tentative respect forming where fear had once been absent. Elias felt the weight of the moment, the enormity of what had been achieved without violence beyond necessity. The Alpha nudged him gently, a reminder of the bond that had made this possible, the mutual trust that transcended species. Elias exhaled, heart steady, pulse aligned with the Predator's own rhythm. The plains were quiet once more, and yet the world had shifted irrevocably. He looked out toward the horizon where stars stretched into infinity, and felt a surge of clarity. This was more than survival. It was legacy. Humanity, often dismissed as fragile or reckless, had demonstrated capacity for connection, for courage, and for reshaping the rules of engagement that the galaxy had long taken for granted. Elias turned to the Alpha, their eyes meeting in understanding deeper than words. They had done more than survive. They had established a precedent. The pack gathered close, the Alpha at the center, its massive frame radiant under the emerging dawn. Elias knelt once more, placing a hand on the Alpha's shoulder. For the first time, he allowed himself a smile, not out of triumph, but recognition of the path they had forged together. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. Not because they conquered with weapons, but because they had bonded with the deadliest predator in known space and endured, unflinching, unbroken, and united. As sunlight crept across the plains, illuminating scales, fur, and steel alike, Elias understood fully what it meant to be kin with the apex. The world and the galaxy beyond had witnessed the beginning of a new era. One where humanity did not simply exist among the stars but shaped them. And in that quiet, thrilling moment, he realized the truth he had long suspected. The universe did not fear humans enough. Yet now, through bond and courage, that fear would begin, subtle, inevitable, and permanent.